The wind howled like a wounded animal, slicing through the darkness with icy teeth. Snow fell in thick, angry sheets, obscuring everything beyond the reach of Michael Stevens' headlights as he navigated his old Ford pickup down the deserted streets of Everwood. It was past midnight, the kind of bitter December cold that made even the street lamps seem to shiver, their halos dim against the storm. Michael's shoulders ached from 12 hours at the rail yard. Third double shift this week, at 45. His body protested more than it used to, joints stiffening against the constant lifting, the exposure to cold, the demands of solitary living. But it was the hollow emptiness in his chest that weighed on him most as he turned onto Maple Drive. Knowing exactly what waited at home, nothing but silence and the ghost of what once was. 6 years since Sarah had died. 6 years of coming home to a house that had stopped being a home the moment her laughter left it. He was thinking about tomorrow's schedule when something caught his eye, a flash of color against the monochrome night. Michael squinted through the windshield, wipers fighting a losing battle against the snow. There, huddled on a bench beneath the flickering light of the bus shelter, were two small forms. His foot eased off the accelerator. Children, two little girls, identical from what he could see, curled together under what looked like a thin blanket. One was awake, eyes wide and watchful. The other appeared to be sleeping, her head resting on her sister's shoulder. Michael's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He could keep driving, should keep driving. It wasn't his business. Surely someone was coming for them. Surely they weren't alone. But Sarah's voice whispered in his memory, "If you see someone who needs help, Michael, be their light. Promise me." The last promise he'd made to her as she lay in that hospital bed, tubes and monitors singing their mechanical dirge around her, with a deep breath. Michael pulled the truck to the curb and killed the engine. The sudden silence pressed in around him, broken only by the soft hiss of snow against glass. He zipped his coat up to his chin, pulled his worn woolen hat down over his ears, and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit him like a physical blow. He trudged through ankle-deep snow, breath clouding around his face. As he approached the bus shelter, the awake child looked up, neither frightened nor particularly relieved, just watching with a kind of weary patience that no 6-year-old should possess. "Are you angels?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "Mommy said angels come when it's really cold." The question knocked the breath from Michael's lungs. He crouched down slowly, keeping a respectful distance. Up close, he could see that her sister's lips had taken on a bluish tinge, her cheeks flushed with cold. "No," he said softly. "I'm no angel, sweetheart, but I've got heat, food, and a couch that's a lot warmer than this bench. Will you come with me?" The girl looked at her sleeping sister, then back at Michael. Her answer came without hesitation. "Okay." Michael carefully lifted the sleeping child, who stirred but didn't wake, her small body frighteningly cold even through his gloves. The other girl took his offered hand with a trusting grip that made something twist in his chest. "I'm Lily," she said as he helped her into the truck. "She's Rose. We're 6. Michael cranked the heat as high as it would go, watching in the rear-view mirror as he tucked emergency blankets around them both. "I'm Michael. Where's your mom?" "Lily." "Mommy went to find food," Lily answered, accepting the bottle of water he offered. "She said wait by the light." "When was that?" Lily shrugged, her expression too old for her cherubic face. "Before the snow got loud?" Those 5 simple words lodged in Michael's throat like glass. He swallowed hard, nodding as if this was all perfectly normal, as if little girls weren't freezing to death on bus benches while he drove home to his empty house and reheated lasagna. "You're safe now," he said, more to himself than to them. "Let's get you warm." As Michael drove cautiously through the storm, Rose began to stir, blinking awake with momentary confusion before Lily whispered something in her ear. Instead of fear, the child simply nestled deeper under the blanket, accepting this change in circumstance with the resilience only children possess. Michael's house stood at the end of Oak Lane, a 2-story colonial that had once hummed with warmth and possibility. Now it loomed dark and still, windows like vacant eyes watching his approach. He carried Rose inside while Lily followed, her small hand clutching the edge of his coat. The house was cold. He kept the thermostat low when he wasn't home, but not as bitter as outside. Michael set Rose gently on the couch and immediately went to work building a fire in the long, unused hearth. His hands shook slightly as he arranged kindling and logs, struck a match, and watched the first tentative flames lick upward. "Pretty," Rose whispered, her first word since waking. She and Lily had gravitated toward the growing warmth, standing close enough that Michael could see the firelight reflecting in their identical brown eyes. They wore mismatched winter clothes, coats too thin for the weather, no hats, and sneakers soaked through with snow. "Are you hungry?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Both girls nodded solemnly. Michael heated soup, homemade chicken noodle, one of the few recipes he'd mastered since Sarah's death, and made grilled cheese sandwiches, cutting them into triangles the way Sarah used to do for their nephews. He watched as the girls ate carefully, deliberately, like people who understood that food wasn't guaranteed, as the color returned to their cheeks. Michael tried to piece together their story from Lily's fragments. Their mother worked cleaning jobs. They'd been staying in the place with the cots until recently. Today, they'd waited at the bus stop while their mom went to see about food from a restaurant that sometimes gave her leftovers. "She's been gone a really long time," Rose said, her voice soft with worry rather than accusation. Michael nodded, fighting the knot in his throat. "I'm sure she's looking for you. The storm probably made it hard to get back." A sharp knock at the door startled all three of them. Michael moved quickly, expecting police. Maybe social services, someone official who'd demand explanations he wasn't sure he had. Instead, he opened the door to find a woman, perhaps in her late 30s, her dark hair plastered to her head with melting snow. Her thin jacket clung to her shivering frame, and her eyes, the same deep brown as the girls', were wild with fear and desperation. "My daughters!" she gasped through chattering teeth. "I left them at the bus stop on Maple, please. Have you seen—" "Mommy!" Twin voices called from behind Michael, and he stepped aside as the girls rushed forward. The woman dropped to her knees, gathering her daughters into her arms with such fierce relief that Michael had to look away from the raw emotion on her face. "Lily, Rose, I'm here. Mommy's here. I'm so sorry." "He has warm hands," Lily informed her mother, pointing at Michael. "And he made cheese triangles." The woman looked up at Michael, tears mixing with melting snow on her cheeks. "You found them." "They found me," Michael replied quietly. "Or maybe someone sent me." She stood slowly, keeping one arm around each girl, up close. Michael could see the exhaustion etched into her face, the worry lines around her eyes that spoke of years of struggle. But there was pride there too, and strength, a spine of steel beneath the fragility. "I'm Jessica," she said, extending a hand that was ice cold but steady. "Jessica Parker. I can't thank you enough for helping my girls." "Michael Stevens." He shook her hand briefly. "They're safe now. That's what matters." Jessica nodded, glancing around the living room with a mixture of gratitude and discomfort. "I was working cleaning the back kitchen at Donovan's Grill. They paid me in soup and leftovers." Her chin lifted slightly. "I didn't mean to leave them so long. The storm came faster than they said it would, and the buses stopped running." "You walked back?" Michael asked, noticing now the redness of her fingers, the way she still shivered despite the fire's warmth. Jessica nodded again. "I had to find them." The simple statement hung in the air between them, filled with all the fierce determination of a mother's love. Michael recognized it, had seen it in Sarah's eyes whenever their nephews skinned a knee or caught a cold. The kind of love that would walk through blizzards, fight bears, move mountains. "You need to warm up," he said, gesturing toward the fire. "I've got coffee, tea, whatever you need." Jessica hesitated, clearly torn between the need to get warm and the instinct to leave this stranger's home. "We've imposed enough. It's nearly 1 in the morning and still blizzarding." Michael interrupted gently. "Where will you go?" Her silence answered him. "Stay," he said. "Just for tonight. There's a guest room upstairs with a double bed for you and the girls." Tomorrow we can figure things out. Why? The question was direct, her gaze steady on his face. Why would you help us? Michael thought of all the possible answers: compassion, decency, humanity. But in the end, he gave her the only one that truly mattered. Because no child should freeze on a bench while the world drives by. Jessica studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded. Just for tonight, thank you. Michael showed them to the guest room untouched since Sarah's mother had visited 4 years ago. He found clean towels, a spare toothbrush still in its package, and one of Sarah's old nightgowns that might fit Jessica, for the girls. He unearthed 2 of his own t-shirts that would serve as nightgowns, draping past their knees. Bathrooms across the hall, he explained, setting everything on the bed. Use whatever you need. I'll be downstairs if you need anything else. Jessica's expression had softened slightly. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Michael, he corrected. Just Michael, as he turned to leave. A small hand tugged at his sweater. Rose looked up at him, her brown eyes serious. Thank you for being not an angel, she said solemnly. Michael felt his throat tighten. He managed a smile and a nod before retreating downstairs, where he sank onto the couch and stared into the dying fire. What was he doing opening his home to strangers? Getting involved in their lives, it wasn't like him. Not anymore. Not since Sarah. But as he listened to the soft footsteps overhead, the murmur of a mother's voice comforting her children, something long dormant stirred in his chest. Not quite hope, not quite purpose, but something. The house felt different with them in it, less like a museum of memories, more like a home. Michael woke at dawn, disoriented by the sound of movement in his kitchen. For a moment, his sleep-fogged brain hoped it might be Sarah. Then reality settled over him like the fresh snow visible through the living room window. He'd fallen asleep on the couch, still in yesterday's clothes. He rose stiffly, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair before making his way to the kitchen. Jessica stood at the stove, hair damp from a shower, wearing the clothes she'd arrived in now, dried in a borrowed cardigan of Sarah's that hung loosely on her slender frame. She was making pancakes, the familiar scent filling the kitchen with an almost forgotten warmth. I hope you don't mind, she said, turning as he entered. The girls were hungry, and I wanted to do something to thank you. Not at all. Michael moved to the coffee maker, grateful for the routine task that gave his hands something to do. You didn't have to cook. I know. Jessica flipped a pancake with expert precision. But I wanted to. Cooking it's what I do, what I used to do. Anyway, you're good at it, Michael observed, watching as she arranged perfect golden circles on a plate. Were you a professional? Something flickered across Jessica's face, pride, perhaps, or nostalgia before she shook her head. Just a mom who likes to feed people. The girls appeared then, still in Michael's oversized t-shirts, hair tousled from sleep. They climbed onto the kitchen stools with practiced ease, as if they'd been having breakfast in this kitchen their entire lives. Mr. Michael, do you have syrup? Lily asked, eyeing the pancakes hungrily. And berries, Rose added, her voice hopeful. Michael found maple syrup in the pantry and, miraculously, frozen blueberries in the freezer that Sarah must have put there before everything changed. Jessica quickly heated them into a simple compote, and soon all 4 of them were seated around the kitchen table, sharing a breakfast that felt improbably normal. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. Sunlight glinted off white-draped trees and rooftops, dazzling in its brilliance. But the roads remained buried, the plows not yet having made their way to Oak Lane. Looks like we're snowed in, Michael commented, peering out the window. The plow usually hits the main roads first. Might be afternoon before they get here. Jessica nodded, her expression torn between gratitude and discomfort. We've imposed enough. I can walk with the girls to the main road. Try to catch a bus. In this, Michael gestured toward the knee-deep snow. Where would you go, again? That telling silence. The shelter, Lily supplied helpfully. But Mommy says it's full most days now, 'cause it's cold. Jessica shot her daughter a look that was half reproof, half resignation. We'll figure something out. We always do. Michael studied her face, the pride that wouldn't let her ask for help, the determination that had kept her and her daughters alive despite circumstances he could only imagine. He recognized that pride. It was the same stubborn self-reliance that had kept him functioning after Sarah died. That had made him refuse his sister's invitations to stay with her family until he got back on his feet. Some wounds you had to heal on your own, or at least, that's what he'd believed. Stay, he said simply. At least until the road's clear. Please. Jessica looked at her daughters, then back at Michael. Something in her expression shifted, not surrender, but a strategic retreat. All right, until the road's clear. The day passed in a strange, comfortable rhythm. Michael shoveled the driveway while the girls built a lopsided snowman in the yard, their laughter bright against the winter stillness. Jessica insisted on helping with lunch, and Michael found himself enjoying the simple camaraderie of chopping vegetables beside her for a hearty soup. You haven't always lived alone, Jessica observed as she diced carrots with professional precision. It wasn't a question, but Michael answered anyway. My wife, Sarah, she died 6 years ago. Car accident. Jessica's knife paused. I'm sorry. Yeah, me too. Michael focused on the onion he was slicing, grateful for the excuse it provided for the moisture in his eyes. What about the girl's father? Not in the picture. Jessica's tone made it clear the subject was closed. It's been the three of us since they were babies. Michael nodded, respecting her privacy. They worked in companionable silence until Rose bounded into the kitchen, cheeks flushed from the cold. Mommy, Mr. Michael, come see our snow angel family. They followed her outside, where Lily was putting the finishing touches on a row of snow angels, 3 small ones and 1 large one. That's you, Mr. Michael, Lily explained, pointing to the large snow angel. You're watching over us. Something caught in Michael's throat. He nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in his chest. When he glanced at Jessica, he saw her watching him, her expression softened by something like understanding. The moment was interrupted by the rumble of a snowplow making its way down Oak Lane. Jessica's shoulders straightened almost imperceptibly, her chin lifting as she turned to Michael. We should get our things together, she said quietly. Michael wanted to protest, to insist they stay longer, but he recognized the resolution in her eyes. At least let me drive you wherever you need to go. By late afternoon, Michael's truck was cleared and the roads passable. Jessica and the girls gathered their few belongings, now dry and warm. The girls had made thank you cards with paper and crayons Michael had found in a drawer, covered in colorful scribbles and wobbly hearts. Where to? Michael asked as they settled into his truck. Jessica hesitated. The community center on Elm Street. Please, they have day services until 5. Michael nodded, trying not to think about where they would go after 5, or where they would sleep tonight. It wasn't his business. He'd done what he could more than most would have, and now they would go their separate ways. That was how the world worked. The community center was a squat brick building with a hand-painted sign announcing, Everwood Cares, all are welcome. Michael pulled up to the entrance, putting the truck in park, but leaving the engine running. An awkward silence fell over the cab. Thank you, Jessica said finally, her voice steady. For everything. It was nothing, Michael replied automatically. No, Jessica's gaze was direct. It wasn't nothing. You saved my daughter's lives. I won't forget that. Michael nodded, unable to find adequate words. The girls chimed in with their thanks, and then they were climbing out of the truck, a trio of resilience against the cold world. He watched them walk toward the community center entrance, Jessica's arm around each girl's shoulder, their steps in perfect sync. He should drive away, go home to his quiet house, return to his orderly, solitary life. Instead, Michael found himself turning off the engine and following them inside. The community center hummed with activity volunteers serving early dinner, children playing in one corner, adults huddled in conversation or filling out forms at folding tables. Jessica turned in surprise as Michael approached. I thought maybe I could help, he said. feeling suddenly awkward. I'm pretty good with a soup ladle. Jessica's expression was unreadable for a moment before a small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. They can always use another pair of hands. That evening, Michael learned more about Everwood's invisible citizens, the families balancing on the knife's edge of poverty, the elderly whose fixed incomes couldn't keep pace with rising costs, the veterans struggling to reintegrate into civilian life. He ladled soup, distributed bread, and wiped tables alongside Jessica, who moved through the space with the easy confidence of someone familiar with its rhythms. "You volunteer here often?" he asked during a lull. "When I can," she replied, watching as the girls played checkers with an elderly gentleman. "They helped us when we first came to Everwood. I try to give back." "How long have you been in town?" "About 8 months. We were in Boston before that." A shadow crossed Jessica's face. "I had a good job there. Once, things changed." Before Michael could ask more, a harried-looking woman in a cardigan approached them. "Jessica, there you are. I've been looking everywhere. I'm so sorry, but we're completely full tonight. The storm brought in more people than we have beds for." Jessica's expression remained carefully neutral, but Michael saw her hands tighten on the dishcloth she held. "It's all right, Diane. We'll figure something out." Michael spoke before he could second-guess himself. "They can stay with me. I have plenty of room." Both women turned to him in surprise. "That's very kind," Diane said, "but we have protocols." "It's fine," Jessica interrupted. "Mr. Stevens is a friend. The girls and I stayed with him last night during the storm." Diane looked between them, clearly weighing the situation. "Well, if you're sure." "I'm sure," Jessica said firmly, though her eyes held a question when they met Michael's. Later, as they drove back to Oak Lane in the gathering dusk, the girls chattering happily in the back seat about their checkers victory, Jessica turned to Michael. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he replied, keeping his eyes on the snowy road. "But I meant what I said. I have the room, and it's supposed to get down to single digits tonight. We can't stay forever." "No," Michael agreed, "but you can stay until you find something better than a shelter floor." Jessica was quiet for a long moment. "Why are you doing this?" Michael considered his answer carefully. "After Sarah died, I stopped participating in the world. Just went through the motions. Maybe I'm tired of that." It was the most honest thing he'd said to anyone in years. Jessica didn't respond, but when he glanced over, he saw her looking out at the winter landscape, her expression thoughtful. That night, after the girls were tucked into bed with a story Michael found on his bookshelf, one of Sarah's favorites from her teaching days, he and Jessica sat in the living room, the fire crackling between them. Michael had offered her a glass of wine, which she accepted with what seemed like grateful relief. "They're wonderful girls," Michael said, breaking the comfortable silence. "You've done an amazing job with them, especially given the circumstances." Jessica smiled, a genuine one that reached her eyes. "They make it easy. They're the reason I keep going on days when I'd rather just stop." "I understand that," Michael said quietly. "Having a reason." Jessica studied him over the rim of her glass. "What's your reason?" "Michael." The question caught him off guard. "I'm not sure I have one anymore," he admitted. "Just habit, I suppose. Get up, go to work, come home, repeat." "That's not living," Jessica observed. "That's existing." "Yes," Michael agreed. "I know the difference." They fell silent again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was an ease between them, a mutual recognition of wounds carried and battles fought. Michael couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this comfortable with another adult. This scene. "What did you do before?" Jessica asked finally. "Railroad engineering management. Still do, though I've stepped back from the executive track, preferred to keep my hands dirty." Michael swirled the wine in his glass. "What about you? What did you do in Boston?" Something flickered across Jessica's face, the same expression he'd noticed that morning. "I was a chef," she said after a moment. "Specialized in pastry. That explains the pancakes." A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "The pancakes were nothing. You should have tasted my vanilla bean creme brulee with lavender shortbread." The pride in her voice was unmistakable, and Michael found himself smiling in response. Sounds impressive. It was. Jessica's smile faded. That was another lifetime. Michael wanted to ask what had happened, how a skilled chef had ended up homeless with twin daughters, but he sensed her walls rising again. Instead, he asked, "Do you miss it, cooking professionally?" Jessica's expression softened. Every day, there's something about creating something beautiful, something that brings people joy, even if just for a moment. She trailed off, then shook her head as if dismissing the thought. But that's not the life I have now. My job is to take care of my girls, to give them stability. Why can't it be both? Michael asked. Jessica gave him a look that was half amusement, half resignation. Because reality doesn't work that way. Michael, dreams are a luxury I can't afford right now. The words hung between them, weighted with truth and sadness. Michael nodded, understanding all too well how life could force dreams into hibernation. I should get some rest, Jessica said, setting down her empty glass. Early start tomorrow, I've got a cleaning job at the Bell Tower Inn. Of course. Michael stood as she did, oddly reluctant to end the conversation. Good night, Jessica. She paused at the stairs, turning back to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you, Michael. Not just for the room, but for, she gestured vaguely, for seeing us, after she disappeared upstairs. Michael remained by the fire, turning her words over in his mind. For seeing us. Such a simple thing. Really to look, to truly see another human being. Yet how rarely did people actually do it? How long had it been since anyone had truly seen him? The next few days settled into an unexpected routine. Jessica left early for whatever work she could find cleaning hotel rooms, washing dishes at restaurants, helping an elderly neighbor with laundry. Michael adjusted his schedule at the rail yard to be home when the girls returned from the community center's day program, where Jessica had enrolled them after Christmas break began. He found himself looking forward to their return each afternoon, Lily's elaborate stories about their day, Rose's thoughtful observations, the way they filled his house with noise and life. In the evenings, Jessica would cook dinner, insisting it was the least she could do. Michael would help with cleanup, while the girls did simple crafts or played with the few toys they kept in a small backpack. It was temporary. They both knew. A stopgap until Jessica found more stable housing. But Michael couldn't deny that for the first time in 6 years, his house felt like home again. One evening, about a week into their stay, Michael came home to find Jessica at the kitchen table, head in her hands, a stack of papers spread before her. The girls were nowhere in sight. Jessica, everything all right? She looked up, quickly wiping at her eyes. Fine. Mrs. Eleanor from next door offered to take the girls for cookies and hot chocolate. I hope that's okay. Of course. Michael's elderly neighbor had taken an immediate liking to the twins, often bringing over home-baked treats. What's all this? Jessica sighed, gesturing to the papers. Apartment applications. The waiting lists are months long for anything I can afford, and everything else wants first and last month's rent plus security deposit. That's 3 months' rent up front. Michael sat across from her, taking in the frustration etched on her face. There's no rush. You know, you and the girls can stay as long as you need. That's incredibly generous, but we can't impose forever. You need your life back. Jessica gathered the papers into a neat stack. Besides, I'm not looking for a handout. I want to stand on my own feet, show my girls that we can make it. It's not a handout to accept help when you need it, Michael said gently. It's not weakness. Jessica's eyes flashed. Easy for you to say, you have all this? She gestured around the kitchen. You have no idea what it's like to lose everything, to watch your children go hungry because you can't. She stopped abruptly, pressing her lips together. You're right, Michael acknowledged. I don't know what that's like, but I do know what it's like to lose the future you thought you'd have, to wake up one day and find that everything you planned for is gone. Jessica's expression softened. I'm sorry. That was unfair of me. No, it was honest, and I appreciate honesty. Michael hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever met." A startled laugh escaped her. "Me, I'm a mess. A professional chef who can't even feed her own children properly. You kept your daughters alive and together through God knows what. You didn't give up. That's strength. Jessica." She looked away, but not before Michael caught the sheen of tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Michael spoke again. "I might know of a place, not an apartment, but something that could be more permanent than the shelter." Jessica looked up, wariness and hope warring in her expression. "What kind of place?" "There's an old veterans hall downtown that's been sitting empty since the local chapter disbanded. The building was donated to a community foundation years ago, but they've never found the right use for it." Michael hesitated. "I happen to sit on the board of that foundation." "Of course you do," Jessica murmured, but there was no bite to her words. "It has living quarters on the second floor, nothing fancy, but solid. The main floor has a commercial kitchen that hasn't been used in years." Michael watched her face carefully. "It would need work, but it could be a fresh start. For all of you." Jessica's brow furrowed. "What are you suggesting, that we just move into an abandoned building?" "I'm suggesting that the foundation might be interested in repurposing the space as a community bakery or cafe with residential use upstairs." Michael leaned forward. "You said you were a chef. What if you could be one again?" The look that crossed Jessica's face was a complex blend of longing, disbelief, and caution. That's a fantasy, Michael. Opening a business requires capital, equipment, permits. I don't have any of that." "The foundation does," Michael said simply. "We've been sitting on grant money earmarked for community revitalization for years. This would be exactly the kind of project the donors had in mind." Jessica stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Why would you do this for us? You barely know me." The question hung between them, weighted with all the unspoken currents that had been building over the past week. Michael considered deflecting with something about community service or the foundation's mission. But Jessica deserved the truth. "Because since you and the girls came into my house, I've felt alive again," he said quietly. "And I think maybe this old building could come alive again too, with the right people in it." Jessica looked down at her hands, then back up at Michael, her eyes shining with something that might have been hope. "I'd need to see it first," Michael smiled. "We can go tomorrow." The next day dawned clear and cold, the kind of crisp winter day that makes the world seem freshly minted. After dropping the girls at the community center's day program, Michael drove Jessica downtown to the old Veterans Hall, a stately brick building with large windows and a faded sign above the door. "It looks abandoned," Jessica observed as they pulled up. "It is, more or less," Michael admitted, reaching for the keys in his coat pocket. "The foundation pays for basic maintenance, but no one's really used it in years." The interior was dusty and dim, with chairs stacked against walls and display cases empty of memorabilia, but the bones of the place were solid hardwood floors beneath the dust, high ceilings with ornate moldings, and windows that would flood the space with light once properly cleaned. "Through here," Michael said, leading Jessica toward the back of the building. He pushed open a swinging door to reveal what had once been a commercial kitchen, outdated but spacious, with a massive range, double ovens, and ample counter space. Jessica moved through the room slowly, her fingers trailing over surfaces, her expression increasingly animated as she took in the possibilities. She opened cabinets, tested burners, examined the walk-in refrigerator with a professional's eye. "It needs updating," she said finally, "but the fundamentals are good, really good." "I thought you'd say that," Michael smiled, pleased by her reaction. "Want to see upstairs?" The second floor revealed a surprisingly spacious apartment, 3 bedrooms, a living area, and a small but functional kitchenette. The windows looked out over Everwood's main street, offering a view of the town square with its century-old gazebo. "The girls would love that view," Jessica murmured, almost to herself. They could watch the seasonal decorations change, the summer concerts. "It would be a home," Michael said quietly. "A real one." Jessica turned to him, her expression cautious but no longer closed. This is a beautiful dream, Michael, but how would it actually work, practically speaking? The foundation would renovate the space, both the apartment and the commercial kitchen. You'd work with the contractor to design what you need. Michael had thought this through carefully. We'd offer you a subsidized lease for the first 2 years, with an option to purchase after that if the business is successful. The business being whatever you want it to be, a bakery, a cafe, a combination, something that uses your skills and serves the community. Michael watched her face. Everwood doesn't have a proper bakery. You know, the nearest decent croissant is 30 miles away. A smile tugged at Jessica's lips. Are you saying my croissants would be decent? Mr. Stevens. I'm saying I bet they'd be extraordinary. Ms. Parker. Jessica walked to the window again, looking out at the town that might become her home, a real one, not a temporary shelter. When she turned back to Michael, her expression was resolute. I'd want to be a full partner in this, not a charity case. I'd need to contribute something of value. Your expertise is valuable, Michael pointed out. Your vision for the space, and you'd be the one doing the hard work of starting a business. Still, Jessica's chin lifted slightly. I'd want it in writing that once the business is profitable, I begin paying market rate, and I'd want to know exactly what the foundation expects in return. Michael smiled, admiring her pride even as he recognized the fear beneath it, fear of accepting help that might be withdrawn, of building a life on someone else's terms. We can draw up an agreement that protects everyone's interests. Complete transparency. Jessica nodded slowly. I'd need to think about it. Talk to the girls. Of course. As they walked back through the dusty main hall, Jessica paused by one of the large front windows. Sunlight streamed through the grime, casting dappled patterns across the wooden floor. I used to dream about having my own place, she said quietly. Before the girls, before everything fell apart. I even had a name picked out. What was it? Michael asked. Jessica smiled, a private smile tinged with nostalgia. Sanctuary, because that's what good food is. Isn't it a refuge from the world, even if just for a little while? Michael nodded, understanding completely. It's a perfect name. They stood there for a moment, sunlight warming their faces, possibility hanging in the air between them. For the first time since he'd found two little girls huddled on a bus bench, Michael felt something unfamiliar unfurling in his chest. Not just purpose or satisfaction at helping someone in need. Hope, raw and fragile, but unmistakable, as they drove back to pick up the girls. Jessica was quieter than usual, lost in thought, but when they arrived at the community center, her face lit up at the sight of Lily and Rose running toward them. Backpacks bouncing, identical grins showcasing recently lost front teeth. Mommy, Mr. Michael, they called in unison. We made gingerbread men. Did you eat their heads first? Michael asked with mock seriousness. No, Lily giggled. That's mean. We ate the legs, Rose clarified, so they couldn't run away. Jessica laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Smart thinking. Ready to go home. The word hung in the air for a heartbeat, home its implications washing over all of them. The girls didn't seem to notice, chattering about their day as they climbed into Michael's truck. But Jessica's eyes met Michael's over their heads, a question in them that he couldn't quite decipher. That evening, after dinner, homemade lasagna that put Michael's frozen variety to shame, and after the girls were tucked into bed, Jessica found Michael in his study. He'd been reviewing the Veterans Hall property documents, making notes about the renovation scope. They love it here, she said without preamble, leaning against the doorframe. The girls, they've never had this, she gestured vaguely, encompassing the house, the stability, the normal evening routine of dinner and bedtime stories. They deserve it, Michael replied. All children do. Jessica nodded, moving into the room to sit in the leather chair opposite his desk. I've been thinking about your proposal, about the Veterans Hall. And I want to see it work. I really do. Jessica's hands twisted together in her lap. But I'm scared, Michael, What if I fail? What if I can't make it profitable? Then the girls and I are back where we started. Maybe worse because we'll have had a taste of what could have been. Michael set down his pen, giving her his full attention. What if you succeed? Jessica looked up, startled. Isn't that possibility worth the risk? He continued. And even if the business side doesn't work out exactly as planned, you and the girls would still have a stable home. The foundation wouldn't just throw you out. How can you be so sure? Michael smiled slightly. Because I'm the president of the foundation. It was Sarah's project, originally the Sarah Stevens Community Trust. After she died, I took over. Jessica's eyes widened. You never mentioned that. It never came up. Michael shrugged. It's not something I advertise. Most of the work happens behind the scenes, grants to local nonprofits, scholarships, that sort of thing. And renovating old buildings for homeless families, Jessica asked, a hint of her dry humor returning. That would be a new initiative, Michael acknowledged. But one I think the board will support. The building has been sitting empty for years, and this puts it to good use. Jessica was quiet for a moment, studying him. You've thought this through. I have. Why? The question was direct, her gaze steady on his face. Why go to all this trouble for us? Michael considered his answer carefully. Because helping you and the girls feels right in a way nothing has for a very long time. Because I have the means to make a difference. And what's the point of having resources if you don't use them to help others? He paused, then added more quietly. And because I've been sleepwalking through my life for 6 years, and somehow, your family woke me up. Jessica's expression softened. That's a lot of pressure to put on a couple of 6-year-olds and their mess of a mother. You're not a mess, Jessica. You're a survivor. Michael leaned forward. And I'm not asking for anything in return. If that's what you're worried about, this isn't a transaction. Everything's a transaction, Jessica said, but her tone was gentle rather than bitter. But maybe not all transactions are bad. She took a deep breath. Okay, let's do it. Let's try to make Sanctuary a reality. Michael's smile spread slowly across his face. Really? Jessica nodded, her own smile tentative but real. Really? The girls deserve a chance at stability, and maybe I deserve a chance to be more than just a survivor. You do, Michael said with conviction. All 3 of you do. As Jessica stood to leave, she paused at the door. Michael, yes, thank you for whispering, come with me that night. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't. The words echoed in Michael's mind long after she'd gone upstairs, not just her thanks, but the realization that those 3 simple words had changed all their lives. Come with me, an invitation, a beginning, a hand extended in the darkness. For the first time in 6 years, Michael fell asleep not to the hollow silence of an empty house, but to the gentle awareness of others breathing under his roof, others who might, in some small way, be becoming his family. The next morning, as golden winter sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, Michael made a phone call to the foundation's board secretary, setting in motion the miracle that had begun with 3 whispered words at a bus stop on a snowy night. The transformation of the Veterans Hall began on a bright January morning. 2 weeks after Michael had first shown Jessica the building, the foundation board had approved the project with surprising enthusiasm, particularly after sampling Jessica's apple cinnamon scones at the presentation meeting. I haven't tasted pastry this good since my trip to Paris, declared Eleanor Whitman, the foundation's oldest board member and, as it happened, Michael's next-door neighbor. She'd become the twins' unofficial grandmother, teaching them to knit and telling stories of Everwood in the old days. Now Eleanor stood in the dusty main hall alongside Michael, Jessica, and the renovation contractor, her elegant cashmere coat incongruous against the abandoned space. The bones are excellent. The contractor, a burly man named Frank with decades of experience, observed as he tapped a wall. Solid construction from an era when they built things to last. What's the timeline looking like? Michael asked, watching Jessica as she measured the front windows with a careful eye. 3 months, give or take, Frank replied. The commercial kitchen will need the most work new appliances, Updated electrical, plumbing. The upstairs apartment is in better shape. Mostly cosmetic. We could prioritize that. Have it habitable within a month. Jessica turned from her contemplation of the windows. How soon could we have at least part of the kitchen functional? Even just a couple of ovens and a prep area. Frank considered this. 6 weeks. Maybe we'd have to phase the work. That would be perfect, Jessica said, a plan clearly forming in her mind. I could start small, take special orders, build a client base before the grand opening. Michael smiled, recognizing the spark in her eyes, the same one he'd seen when she first toured the kitchen. It was the look of someone reconnecting with their passion, their purpose. Whatever you need, he assured her. This is your vision. We're just helping bring it to life. Jessica's smile in return held a quiet confidence that made something warm unfurl in Michael's chest. Over the past weeks, he'd watched her gradually shed layers of wariness, like a flower slowly opening to the sun. She still had moments of fierce independence, still insisted on contributing to household expenses from her meager earnings. But there was trust now, and a growing ease between them. Eleanor cleared her throat. While the contractors work their magic, you'll need a temporary kitchen for practice. Mine is at your disposal. Dear, she patted Jessica's arm, the neighborhood ladies' auxiliary would make excellent taste testers. I assure you, Jessica laughed, a sound that had become more frequent lately. Thank you. Eleanor, I might take you up on that. As they walked through the space, discussing plans and possibilities, the twins explored every corner, their excitement infectious. They'd taken to the idea of living above a bakery with storybook enthusiasm. We can help frost cookies after school, Lily declared, twirling in what would become the cafe seating area. And make deliveries to people who can't come get treats themselves, Rose added more pragmatically. Speaking of school, Michael said as they prepared to leave, have you thought about enrollment? The spring semester starts next week. Jessica nodded, her expression turning serious. I filled out the paperwork yesterday. They'll be at Everwood Elementary. It's walking distance from here, which is perfect. I can drive them, Michael offered automatically. At least until you're settled here. A familiar, stubborn expression crossed Jessica's face, but before she could protest, Rose tugged at her sleeve. Please, Mommy, Mr. Michael's truck has the best heater, and he knows all the dinosaur songs. Jessica raised an eyebrow at Michael. Dinosaur songs? He shrugged, feeling a faint heat rise in his cheeks. It's a long commute sometimes. Her expression softened into amusement. Well, I wouldn't want to deprive them of dinosaur songs. That small concession allowing him to help, to remain part of their daily lives even as they moved toward independence, felt like a victory. Michael tried not to examine too closely why it mattered so much. The weeks that followed settled into a busy rhythm. Renovations at the Veterans Hall proceeded, with Jessica visiting the site daily to consult on kitchen design and color schemes. The girls started at Everwood Elementary, quickly becoming popular for their twin antics and sunny dispositions. And Michael found himself looking forward to each day in a way he hadn't in years. Whether it was driving the girls to school or reviewing contractor invoices with Jessica in the evenings, his house, once a mausoleum of memories, now hummed with life homework spread across the dining table. Impromptu dance parties in the living room, the constant aroma of Jessica's culinary experiments. He knew it was temporary, that soon they would move into their new home above Sanctuary, but he found himself treasuring each ordinary moment, storing them up against the coming quiet. One evening in early February, Michael arrived home to find Jessica in the kitchen, surrounded by parchment paper, piping bags, and bowls of brightly colored icing. Music played softly from his rarely used stereo, and she moved in time with it as she decorated what appeared to be heart-shaped cookies. Valentine's test run, she explained when she saw him watching. Eleanor's ladies' auxiliary placed an order for their luncheon next week. They look professional, Michael observed, admiring the delicate patterns. They should, Jessica replied with a hint of pride. I used to do this for a living. Remember, Michael smiled, setting down his briefcase and rolling up his sleeves. Need any help? Jessica raised an eyebrow. Can you pipe a straight line? Probably not, but I can wash dishes like a champion. She laughed, gesturing to the sink already filling with bowls and measuring cups. Be my guest. They worked side by side in comfortable silence. Jessica focused on her artistry, Michael methodically cleaning up behind her. It struck him how domestic the scene was, how natural it felt to share this space, this moment. Where are the girls? He asked eventually. Eleanor kidnapped them for dinner and a movie. Some Disney thing they've been begging to see. Jessica carefully added a final flourish to a cookie. She insisted I needed an evening to work without little helpers. Michael chuckled. She's not wrong. Last time they helped with baking, I found flour in places I didn't know existed. Worth it, though, Jessica said softly. The look on their faces when they create something. You're a good mother. Jessica. She glanced up, startled by the simple declaration. I'm trying to be. It hasn't always been easy. Michael sensed an opening, a crack in the protective wall she'd built around her past. What happened in Boston? Jessica's hands stilled over the cookies. For a moment, he thought she might deflect as she had before, but then she set down the piping bag and wiped her hands on a towel. I was head pastry chef at Lumiere, she said finally. It was everything I'd worked for. Creative freedom, respect in the industry, stability. She smiled faintly. I could afford a nice apartment, quality childcare. The girls were happy. I was happy. What changed? Jessica's expression clouded. The pandemic. The restaurant industry was hit hard. Lumiere tried to pivot to takeout. But fine dining doesn't translate well to cardboard boxes. They held on as long as they could. But eventually, she shrugged, the gesture eloquent in its resignation. They closed. Michael finished for her. Jessica nodded. I thought I'd find something else. I had contacts, recommendations, but everyone was in the same boat, established chefs fighting for the few positions left. And then, she hesitated. Then, Rose got sick, really sick. Pneumonia that wouldn't respond to the first round of antibiotics. Jessica's voice grew tight. I missed interviews staying with her in the hospital, spent our savings on medical bills. When she finally recovered, I was months behind on rent with no prospects. Michael's heart ached for her, for what she'd endured alone. The girl's father wasn't in the picture to help. A flash of something anger, perhaps, or old pain crossed Jessica's face. He left when I was pregnant, decided fatherhood wasn't in his 5-year plan. I'm sorry. Don't be. The girls and I are better off without him. Jessica picked up a cookie, studying it with unnecessary intensity. Anyway, after the eviction, we stayed with friends until we wore out our welcome. Then shelters, moving from city to city, taking whatever work I could find, Boston to Worcester to Springfield, and eventually here. Why Everwood? Michael asked gently. Jessica's smile was tinged with irony. The bus ticket was cheap, and I'd heard the community center had a good reputation for helping families. Just meant to stay until I saved enough to move somewhere with more opportunities. And then, the storm, Michael finished. The storm, she agreed. And you. Their eyes met across the kitchen island, the simple statement hanging between them, weighted with everything unspoken. Michael was acutely aware of how close they stood, of the flour dusting Jessica's cheek, of how the evening light caught in her dark hair. The moment stretched, electric with possibility, until the kitchen timer dinged, startling them both. Jessica turned quickly to remove a fresh batch of cookies from the oven, and Michael returned to the dishes, his heart beating a rhythm unfamiliar and yet achingly recognizable. Later, after the cookies were cooled and packaged, after they'd shared a simple dinner and settled in the living room with cups of tea, Michael found the courage to ask the question that had been brewing since their conversation. The bakery sanctuary, what's your dream for it beyond making it work financially? I mean, Jessica considered this, cradling her mug between her palms. I want it to be more than just a place that sells baked goods. I want it to be a gathering place, somewhere people feel welcome, feel seen. She smiled softly. When I was growing up, my grandmother's kitchen was the heart of our family. No matter what was happening, good or bad, that's where we came together. Food has that power, to comfort, to celebrate, to heal. Michael nodded, understanding completely. Sarah used to say that about her classroom, that it wasn't just about teaching reading and math, but about creating a space where children felt safe to grow. She sounds like she was an amazing woman, Jessica said gently. She was, for the first time. Michael found he could say this without the crushing weight of grief. She would have liked you, and the girls. I wish I could have known her. The sincerity in Jessica's voice wrapped around Michael's heart like a warm embrace. They sat in companionable silence, the clock ticking peacefully in the background, until the sound of Eleanor's car in the driveway announced the twins' return. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. The apartment above Sanctuary neared completion, with fresh paint, refinished hardwood floors, and new fixtures transforming the space into a welcoming home. Jessica split her time between helping with the renovation decisions and building her business plan, often working late into the night at Michael's dining table. Surrounded by spreadsheets and recipe books, Michael found himself increasingly involved, offering advice on business matters when asked, stepping back when Jessica needed to make her own decisions. It was a delicate dance, supporting without overstepping, and he wasn't always sure he got the balance right. But Jessica seemed to appreciate his input, even when she ultimately went her own way. The girls thrived in their new school, making friends and bringing home artwork that soon covered the refrigerator door. They spoke of the move to Sanctuary with excitement, planning their new bedroom down to the color of the curtains. But sometimes, in quiet moments, Michael caught them watching him with thoughtful expressions that seemed too knowing for their 6 years. "Are you going to live with us at the bakery?" Lily asked one evening as he helped her with homework at the kitchen table. The innocent question caught Michael off guard. "No, sweetheart. This is my home. You and Rose and your mom will have your own home above Sanctuary." Lily frowned. Pencil paused over her math worksheet. "But then who will check for monsters under our beds?" Michael's heart constricted. "I'm sure your mom is excellent at monster checking." "She is," Lily conceded, "but she can't do the monster voice like you, and she doesn't know the secret monster go-away song." Before Michael could formulate a response, Rose looked up from her own homework across the table. "Mom says we'll still see Mr. Michael lots. He's going to help at Sanctuary sometimes." The matter-of-fact statement, clearly something Jessica had discussed with them both, warmed and unsettled Michael. He hadn't explicitly discussed his future involvement with the bakery beyond the initial setup. The assumption that he would remain part of their lives felt simultaneously right and presumptuous. "Your mom is right," he said finally. "I'll still be around to help, and you can visit me here whenever you want." The answer seemed to satisfy them, and they returned to their homework. But the exchange lingered in Michael's mind. A reminder of the complex attachments forming between them, all attachments that would need to evolve once the physical distance of separate homes became reality. On a bright March morning, with snow melting from the eaves and hints of spring in the air, Jessica received the news they'd been waiting for. The apartment was ready for occupancy. The bakery kitchen would need another few weeks, but the living space was complete, down to the fresh linens on the beds and curtains on the windows. "We can move in this weekend," she told Michael over breakfast, her expression a mixture of excitement and something that might have been regret. "The girls will finally have their own rooms." "That's wonderful," Michael said with a smile he hoped looked genuine. "They'll be thrilled." Jessica studied him over her coffee mug. "You'll help us move." "Not that we have much to move." "But, of course," Michael assured her. "Whatever you need." The move itself was a simple affair, beyond the clothes and few possessions they'd arrived with. Jessica had acquired only essentials during their stay, educational toys for the girls from the thrift store, baking tools for herself, a few books. Everything fit easily in Michael's truck in a single trip. The apartment above Sanctuary was filled with light from its many windows, the freshly painted walls a warm cream color that made the space feel both cozy and spacious. The girls ran from room to room, exclaiming over features as simple as built-in bookshelves and a window seat overlooking the town square. "This one's mine," Lily declared, claiming the bedroom with pale yellow walls. No, we share, Rose countered, tugging her sister's hand. Remember Mommy said we could decide if we want separate rooms or to stay together? Oh, right, Lily considered this. Together is better. Then we can have the big room with the window seat. Jessica watched them with a smile, shaking her head at their logic. Should I have predicted that? Probably, Michael chuckled, setting down the last box in the kitchen area. The big room it is. Then, they spent the day settling and hanging clothes, arranging books, placing the few personal items they possessed to make the space feel like home. Eleanor arrived mid-afternoon with housewarming gifts, handmade curtains for the kitchen, potted herbs for the windowsill, and a quilt she'd been secretly making for the girls' bed. Every home needs something handmade with love, she declared, settling into an armchair like a queen on her throne. By evening, the apartment had transformed from a beautiful but impersonal space to a home that reflected the small family that would live there. Michael ordered pizza for dinner, a celebration. He insisted, and they ate around the kitchen table, the girls chattering excitedly about their plans for decorating and the proximity to the school playground. As the evening wore on, Eleanor made her excuses, hugging each of them before departing with promises to return for a proper tour of the bakery once it was finished. The girls, exhausted from the excitement of the day, fell asleep on the couch while watching a movie on the small television Michael had brought as a housewarming gift. Jessica carried them one by one to their new bedroom, tucking them in beneath Eleanor's colorful quilt when she returned to the living room. She found Michael standing at the front window, looking out at the town square below, now lit by antique-style street lamps. It's a beautiful view, she said, joining him. It is, Michael agreed. You can see why this was once the heart of town, and could be again, Jessica smiled. I have plans for that square. Outdoor seating in summer, maybe music on weekends. The farmer's market could use a boost too. Michael turned to look at her, struck by the animation in her face, the confidence in her voice. This wasn't the wary, exhausted woman he'd met on that snowy night in December. This was Jessica, as she was meant to be, full of vision and purpose. You're going to change this town, he said softly. For the better. She glanced at him, a hint of color rising in her cheeks. With help, I couldn't have done any of this without you. Michael, you would have found a way, he assured her. You're remarkably resourceful. Maybe, Jessica looked back out at the square. But I'm glad I didn't have to. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the occasional car pass through the quiet streets. Then Jessica turned to face him fully. This isn't goodbye, you know, she said, her tone gentle but firm. Just because we're not under your roof doesn't mean we're not still connected. The word hung between them, laden with possibilities neither had yet defined. Michael found himself acutely aware of how close they stood, of the soft scent of vanilla that seemed to follow Jessica everywhere, of the warmth in her dark eyes. I'm glad, he said simply. Honestly, I've grown rather attached to you all. Jessica smiled, something vulnerable and brave in her expression. The feeling is mutual, for a heartbeat. Michael thought she might step closer, that the moment might crystallize into something more defined. But then a car horn honked in the square below, breaking the spell. Jessica stepped back slightly, her smile turning more casual. You'll come by tomorrow. The contractors need a final sign-off on the kitchen equipment before it's delivered. I'll be here, Michael promised, recognizing the shift in her tone, respecting the boundaries she seemed to be maintaining. First thing in the morning, as he gathered his coat and prepared to leave, Jessica walked him to the door. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. I don't know if I've said that enough. You have, Michael assured her. More than enough. Impulsively, Jessica rose on tiptoe and pressed a kiss to his cheek, her hand resting briefly on his arm. Good night, Michael. Good night, Jessica. The drive home was quiet, the truck cab unnaturally empty without the twins' chatter from the back seat, as Michael pulled into his driveway. He was struck by how dark the house looked, all the lights left off when they departed that morning. No one home to welcome him. He sat in the truck for a long moment, key in the ignition, staring at the silent structure. For 6 years, he'd returned to this emptiness without truly feeling it. Now, after just a few months of noise and life and shared meals, the solitude felt deafening. With a sigh, Michael finally exited the truck and walked to the front door. Inside, the house was unnaturally still, every footstep echoing. He moved through the rooms, turning on lights, trying to reclaim the space as his own. But everywhere he looked, he saw ghosts of the life that had briefly filled these walls. Lily's drawings still taped to the refrigerator, Rose's favorite reading spot in the window seat, the faint scent of Jessica's baking lingering in the kitchen. Michael poured himself a small measure of whiskey and carried it to the back porch, settling into one of the Adirondack chairs that faced the yard. Above, stars pierced the clear March sky, winter constellations giving way to the promise of spring. He sipped his drink slowly, letting the warmth spread through his chest, counteracting the chill of the evening. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text message from Jessica. Girls woke up and insisted I tell you goodnight properly. Said the Monster Go Away song doesn't work long distance. Their logic, not mine. Attached was a photo of the twins in their new bed. Eleanor's quilt pulled up to their chins, identical sleepy smiles on their faces. Something in Michael's chest both ached and healed at the sight. He typed back quickly, "Tell them the Monster Go Away song works anywhere, anytime. That's the magic of it. Sweet dreams to all of you." Jessica replied almost immediately. "We believe you. Good night, Michael. Thank you for making today special." Michael tucked the phone away, a smile lingering on his lips despite the hollow feeling in his chest. They weren't gone. Not really. Just a short drive away. This was what he'd wanted for them: independence, stability, a fresh start. The fact that it came with a certain distance was necessary. Proper, even. They needed to build their own life, not become entangled in his. So why did it feel like he'd lost something precious? The question followed him inside, up the stairs, and into dreams filled with small hands and vanilla scent, and the sound of laughter echoing through empty rooms. The next few weeks established a new routine. Michael still drove the girls to school most mornings, using the extra time before work to check on the bakery's progress. Evenings often found him at Sanctuary, reviewing invoices with Jessica, or helping install shelving, or simply sharing dinner with the small family in their new home. The bakery itself was taking shape beautifully. The commercial kitchen gleamed with new equipment. The cafe area featured comfortable seating and local artwork, and the display cases stood ready to showcase Jessica's creations. The foundation had been generous with the budget, recognizing the potential not just for a successful business, but for a community gathering place. Jessica threw herself into preparations for the opening, testing recipes, designing menus, and building relationships with local suppliers. She'd hired 2 part-time assistants, both young mothers from the community center's job training program, and spent hours teaching them the basics of professional baking. "You're building more than a business," Michael observed one evening as he helped her arrange the cafe's vintage tables and chairs. "You're creating opportunities," Jessica smiled, adjusting a table just so. "I'm paying forward what was given to me. It's the least I can do." Her humility was genuine, but Michael was continually impressed by her vision and drive. She approached Sanctuary not just as a means to support her family, but as a way to contribute to the community that had welcomed them. She'd already arranged to provide day-old bread to the community center, started a weekly baking class for seniors at the local retirement home, and designed a summer internship program for high school students interested in culinary careers. As the opening day approached, scheduled for the first weekend in April to coincide with Everwood's annual Spring Festival excitement built throughout the town, Eleanor's Ladies Auxiliary had spread the word about Jessica's extraordinary baking skills, and advance orders were already coming in for everything from birthday cakes to wedding pastries. "You're going to need more help," Michael told Jessica as they reviewed the order book one evening. "This is more than you and 2 part-timers can handle." Jessica nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture he'd come to recognize as a sign of her thinking deeply. "I know. I'm interviewing another assistant tomorrow, and I was thinking—" "Yes," she glanced at him, a hint of mischief in her eyes. How are your kneading skills? Michael laughed. Non-existent, I'm afraid, but I'm a quick learner. Good, Jessica said decisively, because I'm putting you on the schedule for Saturday mornings. The girls can help too. They're surprisingly good at rolling dough. The casual assumption that he would be part of this part of their lives beyond the initial setup warmed Michael in a way he couldn't quite articulate. It wasn't just that she wanted his help, it was that she seemed to want his presence. His participation in this new chapter they were all writing. 2 weeks before the grand opening, Frank the contractor officially signed off on the renovation, handing over the final keys with a flourish. She's all yours, he declared, grinning at Jessica. Treat her well. I intend to, Jessica promised, her expression solemn despite the joy dancing in her eyes. That evening, after the girls were in bed, Jessica invited Michael to stay for a glass of wine, a rare indulgence for her. He'd noticed they sat in the cafe area. Lights dimmed except for the small table lamp between them. Windows reflecting the quiet town square outside. I can hardly believe it's real, Jessica said, gesturing around the space that had transformed from abandoned building to vibrant business in just a few months. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll wake up and be back on that bus bench. It's real, Michael assured her, raising his glass in a small toast. You made it real. We made it real, she corrected gently. I couldn't have done this alone. Michael smiled, accepting the acknowledgement but unwilling to take too much credit. You did the hard part. I just provided the space. Jessica shook her head, setting down her wine glass to look at him directly. That's not true, and you know it. You provided more than space. Michael, you provided belief when I'd lost my own. You saw something in me and us when we were at our lowest. The sincerity in her voice touched something deep in Michael's chest. It wasn't hard to see, he said quietly. You've always been extraordinary. Jessica, even on that first night, exhausted and desperate, you had a light in you, a strength. Jessica looked down, a faint blush coloring her cheeks. I don't feel strong most of the time. I just do what needs to be done. That's what strength is, Michael pointed out, continuing when it would be easier to stop. They fell silent for a moment, the comfortable kind of quiet that had become familiar between them. Outside, a gentle spring rain began to fall, droplets tracing silver paths down the windows. I've been thinking, Jessica said finally, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass. About the opening day, I'd like to do something special, something that acknowledges the journey that brought us here. What did you have in mind? She met his eyes, her expression earnest. I want to offer free meals to anyone who needs one, not just that day, but every day, a pay-what-you-can option for people who are struggling. The simple declaration, delivered without fanfare, reminded Michael again of why he'd been drawn to this woman from the start, her generosity of spirit despite having so little herself. It's a wonderful idea, he said. The foundation could establish a fund to offset the costs. Jessica shook her head. I appreciate that, but I want this to come from Sanctuary itself, from our profits. It needs to be sustainable on its own. Are you sure the margins in food service are already tight? I'm sure. Her voice was firm. I was on the receiving end of charity for too long. I know how it can both save you and diminish you. This needs to be different, a gift freely given. With dignity. Michael nodded, understanding her reasoning even as he admired her conviction. Then that's what we'll do. I'm with you. Jessica's smile bloomed slowly, warming her entire face. Thank you for understanding. Always, Michael replied. The word a promise that extended far beyond this conversation. As they finished their wine, the conversation turned to practical matters, final preparations for the opening, the schedule for the first week, plans for the girls during the inevitably long hours Jessica would work. But beneath the logistics ran a current of something deeper, a shared vision taking shape between them. It wasn't until Michael was driving home, windshield wipers keeping time with his thoughts, that he fully acknowledged what had been building in his heart these past months. It wasn't just fondness or attachment or even friendship. Though it contained elements of all three, it was love. Simple, complicated, terrifying love. The realization didn't come as a lightning bolt, but as a gentle dawn, illuminating what had been there all along. He loved Jessica's strength and vulnerability, her fierce protectiveness and her open heart. He loved the twins with their matching smiles and distinctive personalities. He loved the family they formed together, a unit forged in hardship but flourishing in hope. And for the first time in 6 years, that love didn't feel like a betrayal of Sarah's memory. Instead, it felt like an honoring of her most essential teaching that love was meant to be given freely, generously, without reservation. The question, of course, was whether Jessica felt the same. Their relationship had evolved within the context of helper and helped, benefactor and recipient roles that created an inherent imbalance. No matter how much Michael tried to minimize it, would she welcome his feelings, or would she see them as an obligation? A complication she didn't need while building her new life. Michael drove slowly through the rain-slicked streets of Everwood, in no hurry to return to his empty house. As he passed the town square, he glanced up at the lit windows above Sanctuary, where Jessica was likely preparing for tomorrow's work, checking orders, planning menus. He wouldn't rush this, wouldn't burden her with his feelings when she had so much else to focus on. The opening was just 2 weeks away. After that, when things settled, perhaps then they could explore what might exist between them beyond friendship and partnership. For now, it was enough to be part of her journey, to watch her reclaim her dreams and build a future for her daughters. It was enough to know that whatever came next, their lives were irrevocably intertwined. As Michael finally turned onto Oak Lane, his headlights illuminating the familiar driveway, his phone buzzed with a text message. Jessica again. Just realized I forgot to tell you. Eleanor dropped off your invitation to the official opening. It's ridiculously formal, her idea. Not mine, but I hope you'll come as our guest of honor. Michael smiled. Typing back wouldn't miss it for the world. Guest of honor is too much. Though, I'll settle for first customer. Her reply came quickly. First customer. Guest of honor. An official taste tester. The girls insist. They say you have the most honest face. The simple exchange warmed him all the way into the house, through his evening routine, and into dreams that, for the first time in years, looked forward instead of back. The morning of Sanctuary's grand opening dawned clear and bright, April sunshine streaming through the windows of the apartment above the bakery. Jessica had been awake since 4, nervousness and excitement propelling her from bed to kitchen in the still dark hours. The girls, sensing the importance of the day, had risen early too, padding into the bakery kitchen in their pajamas to find their mother already elbow-deep in bread dough. Is it time? Lily asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Almost, Jessica smiled, pausing to kiss the top of her daughter's head. You two should get dressed. Mr. Michael will be here soon to help with the final preparations. As if summoned by his name, there was a knock at the bakery's back door. Rose ran to open it, revealing Michael standing with arms full of flowers, bright spring arrangements in vintage mason jars. For the tables, he explained, stepping inside. Eleanor's garden contribution. Jessica felt a flutter in her chest at the sight of him, a reaction that had become increasingly common over the past weeks. He looked different today, more polished than his usual rail yard manager attire. A crisp blue button-down brought out the silver in his salt and pepper hair, and he'd traded his work boots for leather shoes that suggested this was a special occasion. You look nice, she said before she could think better of it. A hint of color touched Michael's cheeks. So do you. Though you've got a little. He gestured to his own face, and Jessica belatedly realized she probably had flour everywhere. Hazard of the profession, she laughed, wiping at her cheek. No point in getting too cleaned up yet. I've got 6 more batches to go before we open. Michael rolled up his sleeves immediately. Put me to work. Then, what needs doing? The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. The twins set tables and arranged Eleanor's flowers under Michael's guidance, while Jessica and her 2 assistants, Marta and Delia, filled display cases with an array of pastries, breads, and cakes. The coffee machine hissed and burbled as they tested it one final time, filling the space with rich aroma. At precisely 10 o'clock, Jessica untied her apron, smoothed her simple navy dress, and took a deep breath. The girls flanked her at the door, wearing matching outfits they'd chosen especially for the occasion. Yellow dresses with white cardigans, their dark hair neatly braided. Michael stood slightly behind them, his steady presence a comfort Jessica hadn't known she'd needed. "Ready?" he asked softly. Jessica nodded, her throat suddenly tight with emotion. "Ready." With trembling fingers, she unlocked the front door of Sanctuary and flipped the handwritten sign from closed to open. Outside, a small crowd had gathered Eleanor and her ladies' auxiliary, several foundation board members, neighbors from Oak Lane, and curious townspeople drawn by the posters that had appeared throughout Everwood in recent weeks. A cheer went up as the door opened, and then they were streaming in smiling faces. "Congratulations!" Exclamations over the beautiful space and the tantalizing displays. The twins appointed themselves official greeters, showing people to tables and distributing the small welcome cookies Jessica had prepared as opening day gifts. "This is magnificent," Eleanor declared, clasping Jessica's hands in her own. "Absolutely magnificent. You've breathed life back into this old building." "Dear, thank you," Jessica replied, genuinely touched. "For everything. I couldn't have done this without your support." Eleanor waved away the thanks. "Nonsense. All I did was recognize talent when I saw it. The rest was all you." She glanced meaningfully toward Michael, who was helping the girls serve coffee. "Well, perhaps not all you." Before Jessica could respond to the gentle teasing, she was swept into conversation with other well-wishers. The morning passed in a blur of faces and handshakes, of ringing cash registers and continuous baking to restock the rapidly emptying display cases. By early afternoon, it was clear that Sanctuary's opening was an unqualified success. Every table was filled, with more customers waiting for takeout orders. Jessica moved between kitchen and cafe, directing her assistants, chatting with customers, and somehow managing to look completely in her element despite the chaos. Michael watched her from his position by the coffee station, where he'd been pressed into service when the morning rush proved bigger than anticipated. She was radiant, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, flower on her apron, confidence in every movement. This was Jessica as she was meant to be, he thought, not beaten down by circumstance, but elevated by her gifts, her passion. Around 2 o'clock, the crowd finally thinned enough for Jessica to take a break. She joined Michael at the small table in the corner that had been tacitly designated as theirs throughout the morning. "You're a hit," he said, pushing a plate with a sandwich toward her. "Eat something. You've been running on adrenaline for hours." Jessica sank into the chair with a grateful sigh. "It's going well. Isn't it better than I'd hoped?" "It's going spectacularly," Michael corrected. "You're going to need more staff at this rate." She nodded, taking a bite of the sandwich. "Already thinking about it. Marta has a sister with restaurant experience." They fell into easy conversation about the morning's successes and minor hiccups, the comfortable rhythm they'd developed over months of planning now translating to this new phase of their relationship. Michael found himself stealing glances at her animated face, at the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, at the animated gestures she made when describing a particularly enthusiastic customer. "You're staring," Jessica observed, her tone light but curious. Michael smiled, caught. "Just admiring a master in her element. You were born for this, Jessica." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "It feels right," she admitted, "like coming home after a long journey." "That's exactly what Sanctuary is," Michael said. "A homecoming." Their eyes met across the table, the moment stretching between them with unspoken meaning. But before either could break the silence, the twins appeared, breathless from running between tables. "Mommy, Mr. Michael, there's a man asking to see the baker," Lily announced importantly. "Says he's a food writer," Rose added with equal gravity. "From the city paper." Jessica's eyes widened. "A food writer? Here we haven't done any press outreach yet." Michael grinned. "Eleanor strikes again. I suspect," rising from the table, Jessica straightened her apron and tucked a stray hair behind her ear. How do I look? Perfect. Michael answered honestly. The food writer, a bespectacled man in his 50s, with a notebook and a discerning expression, was seated at a corner table. An array of Sanctuary's offerings spread before him. Jessica approached with professional composure, though Michael could see the nervous energy in the set of her shoulders. I'm Jessica Parker, she introduced herself, the owner and head baker. Welcome to Sanctuary. The man looked up, his expression shifting from polite interest to stunned recognition. Jessica Parker from Lumiere in Boston. Jessica froze, clearly caught off guard by the recognition. Yes, that was a lifetime ago. Your autumn harvest cake was legendary. The man's tone was reverential. The food world wondered where you disappeared to after Lumiere closed. Michael watched as Jessica's composure wavered slightly before she recovered. Life took some unexpected turns, she said simply. But I've found my way back to baking, in a different form. The conversation that followed was more interview than casual chat, with the writer asking detailed questions about Jessica's culinary background, her vision for Sanctuary, and her journey from fine dining to small-town bakery. Michael observed from a distance, giving her space to tell her story in her own words. By the time the writer left, having ordered additional pastries to go and promised a feature in the weekend edition, the afternoon crowd had begun to arrive. Jessica returned to work with renewed energy, but Michael could sense something had shifted. A door to her past had been unexpectedly opened, bringing with it both validation and, perhaps, a touch of melancholy for what might have been. The remainder of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. By closing time at 6, Sanctuary's cases were nearly empty, a testament to the bakery's immediate popularity. Jessica's assistants left with tired smiles and promises to arrive early the next morning. The twins, exhausted from their role as junior hosts, curled up in the window seat with books while Jessica and Michael tackled the final cleanup. I can't believe we actually did it, Jessica said as she wiped down the last table. Opened a bakery, from scratch. You did it, Michael corrected gently. I just helped with the logistics. Jessica shook her head, setting aside the cloth to look at him directly. No, we did it. Together. She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. Michael, there's something I need to tell you. The seriousness in her tone made his heart quicken. What is it? When that food writer recognized me, she hesitated. It made me realize I haven't been completely honest with you about my past, about who I was before. Michael leaned against the counter, giving her his full attention. You don't owe me your life story, Jessica. Maybe not, but after everything you've done for us, you deserve the truth. She glanced toward the twins, ensuring they were still absorbed in their books. I wasn't just a pastry chef at Lumiere. I was known in certain circles. I won a reality cooking competition called Sweet Victory about 7 years ago. It launched my career, got me the position at Lumiere. Michael's brow furrowed, trying to understand why this would be something she'd hide. That sounds impressive, not something to be ashamed of. I'm not ashamed of winning, Jessica clarified. I'm ashamed of what came after. The twins' father, he was one of the judges on the show. We had an affair during filming, very against the rules. When I got pregnant, he wanted nothing to do with us, said it would ruin his reputation, his marriage. Understanding dawned on Michael. So you kept a low profile to avoid the scandal? Jessica nodded, not meeting his eyes. He was famous in the food world, still is. If people made the connection between me, the twins, and him, I didn't want Lily and Rose growing up with that hanging over them, or with him suddenly deciding he had rights to them if my career took off. So you buried your talent, Michael said softly. Stepped away from the spotlight. I still had Lumiere. It was enough. Jessica's voice grew firmer. And then when everything fell apart, staying invisible became about survival, about protecting the girls. Michael crossed the space between them, taking her hands in his. Thank you for telling me, but Jessica, you have nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing. She looked up at him, vulnerability in her dark eyes. I've spent so long being careful, hiding who I was. And now, with Sanctuary, with this life we're building, I'm afraid it could all come crashing down if the past catches up to me. It won't, Michael said with conviction. But even if it did, you're stronger now. You have a community behind you. You have me. The simple declaration hung in the air between them, weighted with everything he hadn't yet said. Jessica's hands tightened on his, her expression softening into something that made his heart race. Michael, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. The moment was shattered by the sudden opening of the bakery door, a sound that shouldn't have been possible given that Jessica had locked it after the last customer left. They turned in unison to see an older man standing in the entrance, his distinguished appearance at odds with the tentative, almost hesitant way he held himself. I'm sorry, he said, his voice deep and cultured. The door was unlocked. I saw the lights and thought you might still be open. Jessica stiffened beside Michael, her hands slipping from his grasp. We're closed, she said, her tone suddenly cool. The sign clearly states our hours? The man nodded but made no move to leave. Instead, his gaze moved past them to where the twins sat in the window seat. His expression changed, softening into something like wonder. Lily Rose, he called softly. The girls looked up from their books, identical expressions of curiosity on their faces. They glanced at each other, then at Jessica, clearly sensing the tension that had filled the room. Mom, Rose asked uncertainly. Jessica moved protectively toward her daughters. What are you doing here? She demanded of the stranger, though her tone suggested he was anything but. The man stepped further into the bakery, hands raised slightly as if to show he meant no harm. I've been looking for you, Jessica, for years. Michael moved to Jessica's side, instinctively offering support, though he had no idea what was unfolding. Who are you? He asked, keeping his voice level but firm, the stranger's eyes the same deep brown as Jessica's. Michael noted with a start never left her face. I'm Thomas Parker, Jessica's father. The revelation fell like a stone into still water, ripples of shock expanding outward. Jessica seemed frozen, her expression a complex mixture of disbelief, anger, and something that might have been longing. You left, she said finally, her voice tight with controlled emotion. 15 years ago, not a word since. Thomas nodded, acceptance in his lined face. I did, and there's no excuse that could justify that. But when I saw the article about Sanctuary's opening in the paper yesterday, your picture, the twins, I had to come. Article? Jessica looked confused. The food writer was just here today. His piece won't run until the weekend. Not that one, Thomas explained. The Foundation newsletter, it featured the renovation project, had a whole spread on the new bakery and its owner. He glanced at Michael. I volunteer at the Veterans Hall in Millfield. The director there is on the Foundation's mailing list. Understanding dawned on Michael. The Foundation's quarterly newsletter had indeed featured Sanctuary as its cover story, complete with photos of the renovation and a profile of Jessica and the twins. It had been sent out last week to donors, board members, and community partners including, apparently, the Veterans Hall in the neighboring town. You could have called, Jessica said, her voice strained, or written, instead of just showing up. Would you have answered? Thomas asked gently. The question hung in the air, unanswered but telling. Jessica's silence was confirmation enough. The twins had risen from their seat and now stood beside their mother, eyes wide as they took in the stranger who had claimed to be their grandfather. Lily, always the bolder of the two, stepped forward slightly. Are you really our grandpa? She asked directly. Thomas nodded, his expression softening further. I am, though I haven't earned the right to be called that yet. Rose, more cautious, looked up at Jessica. Mommy, is he telling the truth? Jessica's hand came to rest on Rose's shoulder, a steadying gesture as much for herself as for her daughter. Yes, she said finally. This is my father. The admission seemed to cost her, each word weighted with years of hurt and abandonment. Michael remained at her side, close enough to offer support, but giving her space to handle this unexpected reunion in her own way. "Perhaps this isn't the best time," Thomas said, reading the room with evident regret. "I shouldn't have come unannounced. When I saw the article, when I realized you were so close." He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a business card, setting it on the nearest table. "My number. If you ever want to talk." He turned to go, shoulders slightly hunched as if expecting nothing more. But before he could reach the door, Jessica's voice stopped him. "Wait." Thomas turned back, hope flickering across his weathered features. Jessica took a deep breath, her hand finding Michael's in an unconscious gesture that sent warmth through his entire body. It's been a long day. The grand opening. We're all tired." She glanced down at the twins, then back at her father. "But maybe you could come back tomorrow for coffee. We open at 7. The simple invitation, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a small opening transformed Thomas's face. "I'll be here," he promised. "Thank you, Jessica." After he left, silence fell over the bakery. The twins looked between Jessica and the door, processing what had just happened with the solemn thoughtfulness that sometimes made them seem older than their 6 years. "Was that really Grandpa?" Lily asked finally. Jessica nodded, sinking into a chair as if her legs had suddenly lost their strength. "Yes, sweetheart. That was my father, your grandfather." "Why haven't we met him before?" Rose wondered. Michael prepared to excuse himself, to give Jessica privacy for what was clearly a difficult family conversation, but before he could step away, her hand tightened on his, silently asking him to stay. "It's complicated," Jessica told her daughters, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt other people, even people they love, and sometimes it takes a very long time to figure out how to make things right again." The explanation, simple but honest, seemed to satisfy the twins for the moment. They returned to their books, though Michael noticed them whispering together, no doubt processing this new development in their own way. Jessica looked up at Michael, exhaustion and emotion evident in her eyes. "I'm sorry you had to witness all that. Not exactly the triumphant end to opening day I'd planned." Michael squeezed her hand gently. "No apologies needed. Life rarely follows our plans." A small, tired smile touched her lips. "Isn't that the truth?" She glanced toward the twins, then back at Michael. Would you stay for dinner? Nothing fancy, just whatever I can throw together upstairs. I don't think I should be alone with my thoughts tonight." "Of course," Michael agreed immediately. "I'd be honored." Later, after a simple meal of pasta and salad, after the twins were bathed and tucked into bed with stories about a successful bakery opening, carefully edited to exclude surprise grandfathers, Michael and Jessica sat on the small balcony outside the apartment's living room. The spring evening was mild, stars just beginning to emerge in the darkening sky above Everwood's quiet streets. "I never thought I'd see him again," Jessica said finally, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "My father, after he left, I tried to find him for a while, called relatives, hired a private investigator when I had the money. Nothing." "What happened?" Michael asked gently. "If you don't mind telling me," Jessica sighed, leaning back in her chair. "The classic story. He had another family, a whole other life none of us knew about. When it all came crashing down, he just disappeared, left my mother to pick up the pieces, to raise me alone." Her voice hardened slightly. "I was 17, old enough to understand, young enough to be devastated." Michael nodded, not offering empty platitudes, just the gift of his attention. "The irony is," Jessica continued after a moment, "I ended up in almost the same situation. A man who didn't want responsibility, who walked away. Except I got the greatest gift from it." She smiled faintly. "The girls. You broke the cycle," Michael observed. "That takes tremendous strength." Jessica looked at him then, really looked at him, as if seeing something new in his face. "You know what I was going to say earlier before my father interrupted us. Michael's heart quickened. What? I was going to say that you've become more than a benefactor. More than a friend. Jessica's voice was steady despite the vulnerability in her eyes. You've become essential. Michael, to me, to the girls, to the life we're building here. The simple declaration hung in the night air, freighted with possibility. Michael found himself holding his breath, afraid to shatter the moment with the wrong response. When Sarah died, he said finally, carefully, I thought that part of my life was over. The part where I belonged to someone, where someone belonged to me. I existed. But I wasn't living. Not really. He turned in his chair to face her fully. Until that night at the bus stop. Until you and the girls came into my life. Jessica's eyes shimmered in the dim light. Are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I love you. Jessica Parker, the words once released, felt right in a way Little had in 6 years. You and Lily and Rose. I love the family you are, and I'd be honored to be part of it, in whatever way you'll have me. For a moment, Jessica didn't respond, and Michael feared he'd misread everything, pushed too far too fast. But then she reached across the space between them, her hand finding his in the darkness. We love you too, she said simply, honestly. All of us. It's terrifying and wonderful and completely unexpected. Michael smiled, relief and joy washing through him in equal measure. The best things usually are. He leaned forward then, and she met him halfway, their lips finding each other in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey. It was gentle, tentative, a beginning rather than a culmination, but it held the promise of all that might follow. When they parted, Jessica's smile was luminous in the gathering darkness. So what happens now? Now, Michael said, still holding her hand. We figure it out together, day by day. No rush, no pressure. Just us, building something real. Jessica nodded, contentment settling over her features. I like the sound of that. They sat together on the balcony until the stars fully emerged, talking quietly about everything and nothing, the day's success, the twins' antics, Jessica's tentative thoughts about her father's return, Michael's ideas for expanding Sanctuary's community programs. It was the conversation of two people who had found in each other not just attraction or companionship, but true partnership. When Michael finally rose to leave reluctantly, but aware of the early morning that awaited them both, Jessica walked him to the door. They stood there for a moment, neither quite ready to end the evening, despite the practicalities of tomorrow. Will you come for breakfast? Jessica asked. Before we open, I think the girls would like to see you first thing. They always do. Michael smiled, touched by the simple invitation and all it implied about his place in their lives. I'd love that. 7 o'clock. Make it 6:30, Jessica said with a small smile. I'll have coffee waiting. Their goodnight kiss was brief but filled with promise, the promise of mornings and evenings to come, of a future being written one day at a time. As Michael descended the stairs to the bakery and let himself out the back door, he felt lighter than he had in years, buoyed by the certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The drive home was quiet, Everwood's streets nearly empty at this hour. But unlike the previous night, Michael didn't feel hollow or abandoned as he approached his house. Instead, he felt a curious sense of transition, as if the house, once his refuge and prison, was transforming into simply one of the places he belonged. The next morning dawned clear and mild, the kind of perfect spring day that seemed designed for new beginnings. Michael arrived at Sanctuary promptly at 6:30, letting himself in with the key Jessica had given him for emergencies and early mornings. The bakery was already alive with activity ovens humming, coffee brewing, the twins setting tables in their school uniforms, while Jessica shaped dough with practiced hands. It was a scene of domestic harmony that made Michael's heart swell with gratitude and love. Mr. Michael, the girls chorused when they spotted him, abandoning their task to rush toward him with matching grins. Good morning, troublemakers, he greeted them, accepting their enthusiastic hugs. Ready for school after your big day yesterday? Yes, Lily declared. We're going to tell everyone about Sanctuary. Ms. Thompson already said we could bring treats for show and tell on Friday. Rose added more practically. Jessica looked up from her work, flour dusting her cheeks, her smile warm and private when it met Michael's. "Good morning," she said simply. "Good morning," he replied, the ordinary greeting suddenly full of new meaning. He crossed to her, dropping a quick kiss on her forehead, mindful of the girls watching with keen interest before rolling up his sleeves. "Where do you need me?" "Coffee's ready for customers." Jessica nodded toward the front. "And there's a cinnamon roll with your name on it, warming in the oven." As Michael moved through the familiar morning routine setting up the coffee station, checking the register, warming display cases, he was struck by how natural it all felt. As if this had always been his place. These people always, his family. At precisely 7 o'clock, Jessica unlocked the front door for Sanctuary's second day of business. And there, standing outside with an uncertain expression and a small bouquet of spring flowers, was Thomas Parker. Jessica hesitated for just a moment before opening the door. "Good morning," she said, her tone cautious but not cold. "We're just opening." "I know it's early," Thomas said, holding out the flowers, "but I wanted to be your first customer today." Jessica accepted the bouquet with a small nod of thanks. Coffee's fresh, and the girls are excited to meet their grandfather properly. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning, an open door where before there had been only walls. Michael watched from the coffee station as Thomas was introduced to the twins. As they peppered him with questions about where he lived and what he did, and did he know any good stories, Jessica moved to Michael's side, her expression a complex mixture of caution and hope. "This is going to be complicated," she murmured. "Most worthwhile things are," Michael replied, his hand finding hers beneath the counter. She smiled up at him, trust and love in her dark eyes. "At least we're in it together." "Together," Michael agreed, the word a promise and a future wrapped into one. As the morning sun streamed through Sanctuary's windows, illuminating the scene of family and forgiveness and fresh starts, Michael thought about the night that had brought them all to this moment. A snowy bus stop, 2 little girls shivering in the cold, and 3 simple words that had changed everything. "Come with me." Not a dramatic rescue or a grand gesture, but a quiet invitation to walk together through whatever might come. An invitation that had somehow created a miracle, not with trumpets and angels, but with whispers and vanilla-scented kisses and the simple, profound miracle of finding home in each other's hearts. The next day, the local paper ran its feature on Sanctuary. The headline read, "Rising from Ashes, award-winning chef creates community haven in Everwood." But the real story, the one that mattered most, wasn't captured in the glowing review of Jessica's pastries or the description of the beautifully renovated space. The real story was written in the everyday moments that followed Michael helping the twins with homework at a corner table after school, Jessica teaching Eleanor's ladies' auxiliary the secret to perfect pie crust, Thomas returning each morning, slowly earning his way back into his daughter's life through patience and consistency, the community center clients who found employment and dignity in Sanctuary's expanding operations, and at the center of it all, a family built not from obligation or blood alone, but from choice the daily, deliberate choice to love, to stay, to build something lasting together. 6 months after Sanctuary's opening, on a golden October evening with leaves drifting past the bakery windows, Michael asked Jessica to marry him, not with grand gestures or elaborate plans, but with simple words spoken from the heart as they closed up the bakery together. "I never thought I'd find this again," he told her, holding both her flour-dusted hands in his. "A reason to wake up excited every morning, a purpose bigger than myself, a family." He dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "Jessica Parker, will you and the girls do me the great honor of becoming my family officially? Will you marry me?" Jessica's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at the simple, elegant ring, a silver band with 3 small diamonds representing her and the twins. "Yes," she whispered. "All of us say yes." From their hiding spot behind the kitchen door, the twins burst forth with excited squeals, rushing to embrace both adults in a tangle of arms and laughter and joyful tears. Later that night, after celebration and planning and phone calls to share the news. Michael and Jessica stood on the balcony above Sanctuary, looking out at the town that had become their home. Below, the square was decorated for the fall festival, pumpkins and harvest displays glowing warmly in the evening light. "Do you ever think about that night?" Jessica asked, leaning into Michael's embrace. "The bus stop. How different everything might have been if you just kept driving." Michael tightened his arms around her, grateful beyond words for the life they'd built together. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but then I remember Sarah's words, her last request to me. If you see someone who needs help, be their light." I think maybe she knew, somehow, that this was waiting for me. For us. Jessica turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had whispered those life-changing words on a snowy night. "A miracle," she said softly. "That's what the twins call it. Their storybook miracle." Michael smiled, thinking of all they'd overcome, all they'd built, all that still lay ahead. "They're right," he said, bending to kiss her gently. "Some miracles come with whispers, not shouts, with everyday choices, not dramatic gestures." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms while the autumn wind whispered around them, the twins appeared in the doorway, already in pajamas but clearly not ready for sleep. "Can we look at the stars?" Lily asked hopefully. "Just for a little while." "Please," Rose added, her expression earnest. "We want to wish on the brightest one." Michael and Jessica exchanged amused glances before making room for the girls to join them on the balcony. They stood together, this family formed by chance and choice and love, gazing up at the vast canvas of stars above Everwood. "What are you wishing for?" Jessica asked her daughters. "Or is it a secret?" The twins exchanged one of their silent communications before Rose answered. "Not a secret. We're wishing for our family to be happy forever. And for Sanctuary to have the best cookies in the whole world," Lily added practically. Michael laughed, gathering all three of them into his embrace. "Those sound like wishes that are already coming true." As the stars wheeled overhead and the autumn night wrapped around them like a blanket, Michael Stevens, once a solitary figure, driving through a snowstorm, held his family close and gave thanks for the miracle that had begun with three simple words. "Come with me." Not an ending, but a beginning. Not a rescue, but a journey shared. Not just a house or a bakery, but a sanctuary in the truest sense, a place of belonging, of healing, of hope, a place called home.